Come in, Ocean Sailor. Come in, Ocean Sailor.
Welcome to a new edition of Ocean Sailor. And it's me, Dick Beaumont.
And it's me, Dick Durham. And Dick, we've got a reader's question, or I should say a viewer's question, and it's come from Mr. Ben Ledbetter. And oddly enough, he had watched our podcast on the Trump tariffs and then asked us this, which is, please, could you explain to me and help me understand some of the ratios in sailboat data and what it means with regard to a blue water boat. Now, he's then made a list of abbreviated statistics. Perhaps he's busy packing a grab bag because of the Trumpian world that he now lives in. Who knows? But anyway, Dick, I guess it's over to you to take that one up.
Yeah, well, I can sympathise. We got quite a few American customers, and they're all asking when their boats will be finished now. I think they'd like to slide away and head off over the blue horizon. But yeah, that's a very good question, and a really interesting question, which I'm not going to answer.
Okay.
I'm not. I tell you what, when I say I'm not going to answer, of course, I think the key to the issue and the key to the question is, Ben has said right towards the end, we just need to repeat to all of the viewers what Ocean Sailor is about trying to give people some information that particularly relates to blue water sailing, world cruising, ocean passage making, all of those things, live aboard sailing. And why I say I'm not going to answer is because, unfortunately, statistics can be very much used to confuse the issue and illustrate a given point that particular builder might want to make.
Right.
And what I think would be more useful, and hopefully is what Ben's looking for, is the information or the statistics, some of which is statistics, that I would use to determine whether or not a boat is a true blue water cruising boat or it isn't.
Right, okay. So there's a statistics out there, Dick, available from many builders, which you say possibly is a sort of a matrix of confusion and which you need to be a naval architect to answer. You're saying you don't need that. What you need is, for a blue water yacht, what you're now going to tell us, yeah?
Exactly. And what really I'm saying is this. I think there are some very simple basics that you can understand, that the layman can understand, that the informed layman can understand. But once you start going into the detailed elements of boat statistics, such as sticks and tail and bow angles and God knows what else, actually, there's nowhere to stop to get the right information between where I'm going to take us and actually being a qualified naval arc.
Okay.
And I'm very sure that what we need to do is tell people how to look through the statistics to some extent to really discern the key elements that are important.
Okay.
So I tell you, there are seven. There are seven actual issues, and I'll go through them one by one.
All right.
And hopefully I'll be able to make it clear.
Okay.
Probably the one that we get asked about the most at Kraken is angle of vanishing stability, the AVS. It's also referred to as the point of vanishing stability.
Let me just stop you there, Dave. I mean, sometimes these phrases, because they're technical, aren't very grammatical. And my question to you would be, why do you want stability to vanish?
Well, stability does vanish, whether you like it or not.
Fair enough.
But it's the angle at which that happens that's key.
It's key.
That's why it's the angle of vanishing stability that's important.
Fair enough.
No, let's explain what it is.
All right.
The angle of vanishing stability is the point at which a boat, for whatever reason, is knocked over, firstly to the horizontal and then down into the water, and the angle of vanishing stability is the point at which it will continue to roll and won't come back up the same way.
Right.
In a very well-founded cruising boat, that angle should be, in my view, that angle should be greater than 100 degrees. In a Kraken, for example, Kraken 58, it's 134 degrees. In a Kraken,
Right.
in a Kraken 50, it's 128 degrees. That's the point at which the mast itself is nigh on 40 degrees into the water, well, actually 44 degrees in the 58, and
Wow.
yet it will come back up. Now, the reason it will come back up is the second statistic, and that is the righting moment.
Okay.
Righting moment is the inherent buoyancy and the effect of the ballast and its position to bring the boat up
All
again.
right. Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay.
Good.
We could get involved in GZ curves. Let's not do that.
Keep it
GZ
simple.
curves.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
GZ curves illustrates this point.
Right.
Right? GZ. I'll cover a little bit of what not to start trying to understand towards the end.
Okay.
The next point, in my view, that is critically important is what's called the down flooding angle.
Okay.
And the down flooding angle is the point at which, now think about this, and this again was something we discussed. That's the point at which, when the boat is knocked over,
Yeah.
it will start to flood.
Okay.
So, why is that important? Well, because actually a boat can roll through 360 degrees. It won't be much fun, and it will cause mayhem and probably a dismasting. But a boat can roll through 360 degrees and not sink.
Yeah. Okay.
Down flooding angle means the point at which the boat's filling up with water down below the
Right.
interior volume of the yacht. So now we've got to try and pull that apart and say, well, what do I really want to know? I really want to know when this boat is going to start to flood, and how quickly can I close off all of the salient areas that are going to affect the flooding of the boat. There's your biggie. There's your real biggie. I have a rule at sea, no hatches open.
Okay.
Right? Bam. So that's definitely going to improve your flooding angle. And just by the way, just to illustrate why that is, I learned that the hard way. I was sailing a Kraken 50 from, this is 10 or 12 years ago, from Xiamen to Hong Kong. It was totally flat calm. And so one of the crew went in his cabin. It was a bit warm, so he opened the hatch. The hatch is aft facing anyway. But what actually happened, a passing ship produced a big wave. And as the wake wave hit us, it came right up over the deck, put blue water on the deck and backwards and flooded his cabin. So down flooding angle, remembering the hatches, then think of the next biggie. And it's a real biggie. And again, we touched on this on the Bayesian, which is the companionway, the threshold for the companionway, and how quickly you can close it. So you've got to have a threshold. That means you step over it so that water that floods into the cockpit doesn't immediately flood below.
Right.
So the first thing is it needs this threshold. The second thing is how quick can that hatch be closed? We developed a system which is a sliding companionway on the top and a sliding companionway balanced on the bottom. You do that. 10 seconds, you're sealed off. You're sealed off outside or you're sealed off inside. Not necessarily locked, but you can be. And that means that if there's a really big breaking sea, perhaps coming over your stern, you can just pull it up, shut it. The next one, people don't even recognise it. Bless him, he's died and passed on now. But Ted Brewer was a genius when it came to designing blue water cruising boats. And what he came up with is the Ted Brewer comfort and motion factor.
Okay.
And the motion of the boat is a safety factor. It's a big one. You want the boat to be able to set up on autopilot, be sailing off, do your watch and all the rest of it, but you've got to live on the boat.
Sure.
You know, it's common to be doing a passage land to land of 2 weeks, 3 weeks if you go across the Atlantic, 5 weeks, 6 weeks if you're going to sail from Panama to the Marquesas. So this boat has got to have a motion that you can live with. not least of all because you've got to sleep and you've got to rest. But even in the heaviest weather, or I should say, especially in the heaviest weather, you've got to be able to go into the galley and cook and prepare a meal. So, Ted Brewer's comfort motion factor, very, very important in my view. Everything I'm telling you is what we think about all the time.
But Dick, how is it measured? How did Ted Brewer come up with
it's arrived at by virtue of the length of the keel, the shape of the hull, the displacement of the boat, and here's the biggie, the positioning of equipment in that boat. The heavy equipment has got to go below the waterline, if at all possible, or very low down. The heavy equipment's got to be below the center, the boat's center of gravity. So, and it's got to be laid out in a way that doesn't create that seesawing. When you talk about a boat with a very thin keel, dagger keel, right? And you talk about buoyancy at the bow of the boat and buoyancy at the stern. Actually, unless you're careful, what you're doing is creating a seesaw.
Sure.
And that seesaw, Ted Brewer said, no, that's not good. No. So there's an actual factor. There's lots of statistics go into it.
Okay.
And here's my point. You don't have to understand all of those statistics. You just ask the question, what's the Ted Brewer factor? So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to imagine that you're not in the boat building industry and you're not a naval arc, but you really want to know some nailed on stuff. The next one is a statistic that is not published very easily. It's the displacement net of ballast.
Okay.
Everybody will ask the displacement of a boat. Okay, fine. That may vary between, in a 50-foot boat, that may vary between 12 tons.
Yeah.
And in the case of a Kraken 50, 22 tons.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
But it isn't all alone. It's a matter, and that's why I say net of ballast. Because what I'm heading for, why I'm telling you to look for that, if you take out the ballast weight, the rest is the build specification and the equipment that's on that boat. Okay. And, the heavier it is, this is a massive generalisation, but the heavier it is, it's a very good indicator that you've got a lot more materials gone into that boat.
Right.
Take out the ballast because it's a distortion. And then what you've got left is the core materials and weight that built that boat. Let's just try and get to the core of it. And how well laid up is that boat? Here's the variable. Most generators are pretty well the same weight. Most engines are pretty well the same weight. Most masts and rigs were within a distance, within a range, are the same kind of weight for a 50-foot boat, let's say. But whether the boat is laid up 20 mil thick or 5 or 6, that's your big factor.
Right.
Because the variance is often in the lamination layup, and that simply tells you how robust your boat is likely to be.
And Dick, this displacement net of ballast, which I now understand, thank you very much, leads in a funny way directly into the Ted Brewer factor.
Yeah, it does. So, much he took consideration of the displacement of the boat.
Yeah.
And the next one that you want to know is the hull, keel and rudder configuration.
Okay.
And I'll cut that quite short. I can easily explain. What you want is a raked bow. What you want is a long keel.
Yeah.
And what you want is a protected rudder.
Okay.
That's your hull, keel and rudder configuration. Why do you want a raked bow? Because you want a dry boat. You don't want a submarine. Okay. Plumb boats, straight through waves. Boats with rake have got extra buoyancy as the wave rises up the stem of the boat and the boat rides over the wave. Difference. Length of the keel. Length of the keel gives you directional stability. Tracking, as people call it. Yeah. And if you want to, one of the members of crew that there'll be in every boat is the autopilot. He's often the most valuable person in the boat, right? If you want to make life easy on the autopilot, have a nice long keel so the boat doesn't need, he's going to stay on track.
Sure.
If you've got a good boat, and if you know what you're doing a little bit with sailing, then you should be able to balance the boat. You will only be able to do this generally going slightly upwind. You want to be able to balance the boat, get your sails trimmed, take your hand off the helm and see if she'll carry on going in a straight track.
Oh.
That's what you want. That's tracking. That's why you're autopilot or you. And if you're doing this all the time, right, every wave, the boat's yawing around as she tries to go through the sea motion, then you're gonna be very, very tired. The crew's going to get exhausted. And this circles all the way back to the key thing. What's the most important part and element to consider? Safety. So hull, keel and rudder configuration. An easy one to find, and it is helpful, but it isn't the be all and end all of a cruising boat, is to have a look at the polar diagram.
Okay.
So what the polar diagram, we'll show one here somewhere, what the polar diagram does is it tells you in this wind strength, in this wind angle, the boat sailing well, how close will she go to the wind and what sort of speed does she start to stall at. So they are the 7 points that I think that people need to understand.
I was going to say, Dick, and so when a potential buyer is going to a boat show or a boat builder or seller, he needs to ask these things, but they will know them.
They're vitally important for you to discern whether you go to the next stage and then go and look at it.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And here's another thing, talking about going and look at it. Start looking at the underwater profile. Yeah, I'm passionate about this, as you know, Dick.
Sure.
And I do believe, I was asked not very long ago in one of the videos, why are you so passionate about all of this? Because actually, everything else, as long as you don't sink, is an inconvenience.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's hopefully, Ben, I have answered your questions.
I think you have.
I didn't, answer directly. What does this and this and this mean?
No.
Because it's not where I think you need to go.
No,
and of course, go and sail them. Go and sail them.
Yeah.
Don't think about setting off on a boat to go and sail across the Atlantic or the Pacific with your fam. Don't think about that unless you've gone and sailed it.
Fair enough.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Okie doke.
That's good.
All right. Okay. And if you've liked what you've heard, then please press like and subscribe. Dick is here to ask any question you want. So just put them on our comments. Come on with these questions. Dick will answer them, and I'll
try and give people the information they want. This is not about selling cracking yachts. It's about getting people to go off and have an adventure.
How much are they, by the way? All right. So it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me. I wish you fair winds and easy seas.